In the Name of Overhead Athletics podcast, where we cover rehabilitation, biomechanics, human movement, and optimizing human performance. Welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm joined by Dave Coggin, owner of PFA Baseball, former Major League pitcher, and owner of Pocket Path. And we're going to ask Dave a little bit about that today on the podcast. I'm going to let Dave kind of give a little bit of an introduction to himself here on how he started PFA and what led him to create the Pocket Path. And I think that'll take us into a little bit of a deep dive into pitching mechanics.
Sure. Yeah, man. Thanks. Appreciate me on the show today. And hopefully you guys are hearing me okay. And my kind of background coming from a kind of multi-sport type of athlete. When I was in high school, I was drafted in the first round at a high school with the Phillies in 1995. Prior to that, a few months before that, I had committed to Clemson on a football scholarship to play quarterback. So it was pretty much kind of have to make a decision and ended up making a decision to go play baseball. Did that for 10 years with the Phillies, got to the big leagues for 3, and then went into the Braves, Rockies, and Rays a little bit after that. So played about 13 years total and battled a lot of injuries, shoulder problems mostly, no elbow issues. And when I got done playing, I was kind of intrigued with what kind of role I needed to do or what kind of job I wanted to get into as far as the baseball side of things or sports in general. So I opened up Performance Fitness for Athletes, which used to be called Prevention Fitness for Athletes, because I had a friend of mine that owned a physical therapy facility who I rehab with, and I approached him with an idea of taking kids who are healthy and giving them the same kind of training with that blend of prehab, rehab, and strength training and explosive power training. So kind of putting it all together, just like an athlete would nowadays. Pretty familiar training now, but back then it wasn't very often that guys did that. It was either you just did rehab or you did power training. So that was kind of the whole thing. So I kind of bridged that gap in the beginning about 12 years ago now. And that became a very successful formula for players. And then it kind of grew out. And then I just started to kind of get more involved with seeing how these players weren't moving really well, delivery-wise, mechanically-wise. I saw holes and common themes that were coming up with guys getting injured and just seeing what we could do there. So that turned into more of me getting a little heavier into the mechanical side of things, and then being more on that side of the equation where I had now trainers and other therapists that could handle the fitness side of things. So, and I enjoyed both, and both helped me learn from the other and kind of bridge the gap between what a PT looks at a guy and how a doctor looks at a guy and how a pitching coach looks at it. There was a huge gap in there back in the day, still is pretty much, but it's closing, where now pitching coaches are starting to kind of look at the physiology of everything and just kind of the biomechanics of how the arm should move, how the hips should move with the arm, and how the lower half should work with the hips and the arm. And then that's kind of where we got pocket, whip, and stick, our 3 windows that we look at to identify any areas that we can see some leakage going on and train it. And then the most important part about that is not just understanding those 3 windows and knowing what to look for, but it's more about knowing how you sequence the coaching of it. So what do you start with before you go to this thing, before you go to that? And that I think was the big kind of aha moment in my growing through a coach, is just to learn how not to try to fix everything or not to ignore something unless I've checked off this. And that's kind of where we got the pocket, whip, and stick in that order. And then Pocket Path, obviously, being the thing I'm doing now, and the necessity of something that needed to be made to help me send a guy home and be able to work on something or reach a bigger reach out in the world, to be able to kind of give guys some of the instruction that we would take a lot of time and effort to help with our hands, hands-on stuff. And that's where I'm at now.
When did you guys come out with the Pocket Path? It's in the recent months.
It's really recent. Yeah. Probably about 2-3 months ago. And we've sold out pretty fast on the kit side of things. So we're scrambling to get the plyo balls back in, but we do have the quick kit, we call it. So really started a long time ago. I've been using a methodology of training guys to learn, pitchers, to be an infielder, be a shortstop first, not just be an infielder or do what most coaches have done before, which is just hit ground balls to the the kid who has this terrible arm action and has a difficult time throwing across the diamond or throwing strikes, and taking him and realizing that, the first thing a coach or a scout sees is pretty quickly they see the arm path. I mean, that's like 101, scouting 101. When they see a list of, or a long line of players down a left field line, they're going to, before they know who he is, they're going to see, ooh, I like that arm action. That looks easy. That looks smooth. You see these kind of catchphrases constantly. And then, if you don't have a good arm action, they usually typically put you over at second base, or they put you at first base, or they DH you, or you just don't enjoy the game and you quit and you go play another sport. So being able to throw, to me, even at the basic form, is a super important piece, because the younger you go into baseball, the more variety of throwing motions there are in a bad way. And there's not a lot of coaching instruction at that point, besides maybe just the Cobra drills and all these old school drills that you would see a parent try to help out their kids. So everybody meant well, but what ends up happening, they're ingraining some bad habits. And ironically, the kids that don't get a ton of instruction at a young age, but maybe are just playing shortstop, getting hit a ground ball with their buddies, or playing a lot of stick ball and things, they end up having pretty clean arm action and pretty good deliveries as they grow older, and they continue to keep that, especially when they turn into pitchers. Where these other kids just kind of fizzle out, because as we know in baseball, you could strike out, nobody really cares, everybody does that. You can make an error, everybody does that. You're going to get another shot. You're going to have another ball hit at you, or it's going to be a while before a ball is hit at you. But the second you go out and you're that kid that throws, and your arm is all over the place, your head posture is all over, you look like you don't even know whether you should be throwing right or left. You're so off. Baseball is embarrassing to you. Like it's literally difficult for me to watch kids that do that, because I know they're going to quit baseball. They're going to give up on baseball. And it's an easy fix. They could have fixed that with something that gave them a repetitive motion to work on, and a knowledge of understanding what we're trying to do. And at the higher levels, we incorporate so much more with timing of the hips, because the pocket really is how you put the arm in a position to let the hips time it. And that's really what it all boils down to. The engine is the hips. We get that. The legs are the power, and the hips all incorporate that. But a lot of times what I'll say to kids is, unless you work with a lot of kids, you'll see that just changing the hips, or just changing the legs, or just changing the leg kick or head posture, it will not change what the hand and ball are doing until you feed them that information, even on a basic level. And once you do that, it's incredible. Yeah, I've seen kids that, because the younger kids, they're not strong enough to do it wrong. And that's an important thing that I noticed when I was coaching, is that these older kids who are elite or on pro ball or on TV, they've always been stronger and more elite as an athlete to do it wrong, but still get a good result. The problem is it takes away from longevity most of the time. It takes away from consistency a lot of the time. So they have these flashes of brilliance, and then you don't hear about them. But then when you see these pitchers who last in the game for years and years and years and long time, you see a very identifiable way of throwing that looks very similar to all the other guys that have done that in long careers, especially in today's game. Like people throwing a lot harder now. So there's guys who have played for long careers, but they may not have been hard throwers. But nowadays, premium set with hard throwing, if you're going to throw the ball hard, you better have really clean mechanics, and you better be able to sustain that. So in my opinion, there's not too many ways to do that. There's not a bunch of them.
Yeah, and I watched a video where I want to say you were interviewed by a TV station, I'm not sure, where you kind of talked about the evolution of how you came to the conclusions that you came to in terms of where the arm needs to be, the sequencing of the arm, what you've now coined as the pocket path. We have different terminology here at the OAI, but we're looking at a lot of the same things. And it's kind of interesting how you came to that. We always focused on the arthrology of the joint. How does the joint move? Where's the joint in its safest position? And then what does the athlete actually do when they throw? So we first look at, okay, we've got these certain things that need to happen. The joint has to be in these positions to allow it to be stable. And then we said, all right, let's look at what guys do that are, like you said, the Nolan Ryans, the guys that, the Roldis Chapmans, the guys that throw really hard but have been around for a long period of time, even the guys that were successful, maybe they were the Greg Maddixes of the world. And then you say, what do they do that allows them to be successful? And it's very interesting when the joint mechanics match up with what these elite guys do. So we kind of started with the joint mechanics and the injury perspective, going in the cadaver lab and actually jerking around shoulders and elbows and seeing where does the medial elbow gap, where does the shoulder get into a position where the anterior capsule or the labrum is excessively sheared or tensile loaded. You went from, it sounds like, the guys, hey, here are the guys that have been most successful, what allows them to do it, and we've come to similar conclusions. Because I remember we watched Joe Kelly a few years back. Ed, who was my mentor, now we were just looking at different pictures, and he's like, have you seen Joe Kelly recently? His arm action's totally changed. So then I go online and I went on Twitter and I found your video, and he was like, is that the guy that worked with him? I'm like, I don't know. He put up a video, and he's like, well, whoever's working with him did something right. He didn't say that a whole lot. So then I kind of followed you. And, yeah.
It's kind of like, I'm a big, I mean, I'm blessed with some common sense, I think, and no ego. So I think with that, I just kind of try to strip away and not make it too difficult on me. Like you said, we came to the same conclusion, which, you know, you did it in scientifically and biomechanically and in cadavers and all the things that are awesome, because I just kind of had a gut feeling of going, you know, I know everybody who has a sore arm, just not injured, but just sore, they all get closer to center. They all tighten up. They just do that. That's just kind of natural stuff. So, and then taking it to that other level, everybody kind of thinks that there's so many different ways, because if you went to a spring training game day one and you went to all spring training games and you saw so many pictures, because everybody's throwing one inning. So you get to see a ton of them. And then at the end of the day, I look at you and I go, what did you see that we can teach all these guys and we can become big leaguers too? And it would be like, I have no idea. I mean, heck, my God, I saw guys throwing from long arms, short arms, gloves here, head postures here, short, tall, lefty, righty, sidearm, all these different things. And I'd say, yeah, you're right. And I was thinking the same way. I was like, how do we find some sort of common denominator? How do we narrow this down? So what I did first, which was a great decision on my part, I think, because I said, you know what, let's get rid of relievers. If you'll ask you why, there's some great relievers and longevity and all these things. I said, well, I'm just doing it because I need to do something to clear. And if we all think about baseball, you become a reliever rarely for positive reasons somewhere in baseball. Like, there's no coach out there, or minor league coordinator or high school coach or college coach that says to a guy, man, son, you throw 4 pitches for strikes. You get stronger as the game goes. You get righties out just like you get lefties out. You are never injured. And I think you'd be a wonderful reliever. Like, nobody says that. So like, those traits are traits of a starter who we all want to be. We all want to make $300 million. We all want to be a starter. So the reliever, though, is someone that, hey, you know what, or used to be a starter, and they say, you know what, you don't get righties out, but you do get lefties out. Really great. So it's going to make you a specialist, or vice versa. Or you get the first time through the lineup amazing, or you break down later in the season. So those are all negative reasons, but baseball doesn't have to like correct that. They just go and put you in a different position until they can't use you anymore, because they have free agents, they have recruits, they have the next class, they have so many different ways to replace you. So to me, I was always like, okay, well, let's look at starters. Well, then if you have the 5 starters on a team, if it's your favorite team, you might know all 5. But if it's most likely not your favorite team, you may know only the 1 and 2 guy. You're not going to know the 3, 4, 5 guy, because those guys are sort of bubbling and going back to the minor leagues, or they're going back to being a reliever, or they're getting injured. So the reason why the number 1 and 2 guys make all the money is because longevity. They've stayed healthy at a high clip, or they get injured, they come back and they stay at a high clip. So when I looked at that, I was like, wow, this is so much easier now. Now I only have to look at a handful of pitchers throughout the years. And when I did that, started to see that these guys didn't look that different in certain windows. And that's why I said, well, why don't I teach that? Because instead of just go, you know what, you move like crap, but I think if I got you to do this, you can at least throw some more strikes. Like, that wasn't good enough to me. I was thinking like, no, we can change these kids and give them the habits, and then give them the knowledge, and all of a sudden, bam. And it wasn't as hard as people think. People oftentimes when I'm doing this in the beginning, they're like, oh, you can't change arm action. It's just the way it is, and it's so untrue. And we would do all these things. And then that's what one of my lessons is, this is part of my business part of the story about the pocket path, which is interesting. First of all, the pocket is called the pocket path because I literally had a ball in my front pocket, and these guys were long tossing from my pro guys, and they threw a ball over. It went under a fence, so they didn't have a ball. So I had a ball in my pocket. They're out there by 200 feet. And I just quickly just grabbed it and threw it from my pocket, my front pocket. And when I did that, I realized that the only way I could take it out of my pocket was one way. I had to take it out this way and throw the ball, and it took off and it carried really well. And they're like, what the heck? We just took 20 minutes to throw this far. You just threw it in one throw without warming up. I don't recommend that, but it was just a concept to me. I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah. If I, you can do it that way. And that really trains the type of like an infielder taking the ball out of his glove. He takes the ball out of his glove with his elbow and his hips time up. And an outfielder takes the ball out with his hand, and he gets long and he misses and gets issues. And a pitcher, if he does more of the latter, he's going to have a lot of issues. So then I had one of my parents came work with this new kid. Kid was a really talented young kid, only about 7th maybe grade. And I'm talking to him about my kind of style, my methodology, and the dad, you could tell, is really listening in, and you could tell he's in good shape, and he played probably baseball somewhere. And he goes, after the lesson, he goes, man, that all made a whole lot of sense. Can you give me a pitching lesson? I'm like, you're 60 years old. He's like, yeah, no, I still play. I played in Japan when I was younger. I still play in these 60-year-old tournaments and things. And I was like, oh, wow. So sure enough, he starts improving and his arm's feeling great. And a couple months later, he goes to me and he says, what do you think? We need to make, if you thought about making something that these kids can wear or bring home or do something to work on this, because he went to a Little League practice, and you tell one kid how to do it correct. And we've all been in this position, right? And you go, good, you got it. And then you go over to the next kid, and then you look back and he's doing it terrible, just like he was before. So these kids needed a lot more reps. So he showed a drawing of a shirt that had pockets sewn into it. And I was like, oh, wow, that could actually work. And then I thought, oh, what about like a sleeve that we could put on and detach, kind of like a quarterback has that belt in front to keep his hands warm. Mm-hmm. So in my quarterback days, I just remembered that, and I was thinking, yeah, you could do that. And man, once we started utilizing that, it was insane how quickly the light bulb or the feel or the knowledge or understanding of it was like instantaneously. And the feedback's been incredible for the last like 3 months of us launching this out. Because I was worried. I made some nice detailed drills and videos that go with it, but still I'm not right there next to them. So right. To see and hear, that first couple of weeks of giving it out to a little league dad or a major leaguer or a pitching coordinator, all these people, and then their feedback going, oh my God, this game changer. This made such a huge difference. And I was like, oh man, okay, good. Because I was worried that's
the tough part about it, because kids are especially the young kids, the 7th graders, the 6th graders, the masters of compensation. So you're like sitting there, who knows how these kids are going to do it? Maybe they're going to step with the wrong foot. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've put a guy in a position that's injured and I just put him here. He's throwing at a return to throw program. I just have him go from here. And then he goes and steps with the back foot or something. I'm like, where did this come from?
Exactly.
So it's always like interesting.
Well, short distances can really hide a lot of flaws, because travel ball coach, Little League coach, they're just seeing success. He's getting outs, he's throwing strikes. Great job. Move on to the next coach. You're done with me. I got this other group. So like it's hard for their athletes to really get what they should be getting, which is good instruction or consistent instruction, or hey, you're throwing good, you're throwing strikes. I know you're the best player on the team, but that's not going to play at 54 feet and at 60 feet. And here's why. It's not just me saying it. I'm just saying like, hey, look, this is not going to work. And then with the description and understanding of it, is if you're good at that, that's what really gets them all to understand, oh, I trust you. I see what you're saying. This is why. It's not just me like, hey, there's too much out there. Like, hey, I played in the big leagues, so you should listen to me. I say my first sentence to players when they come in after when we're doing our eval is, hey, listen, I played in the big leagues, but I'm going to tell you, don't listen to me because of what I did. Listen to me the way I'm going to tell you right now. And if it makes sense to you, it's going to work for you. If it doesn't make sense to you, then no problem. You go another way. But I just think I've done it enough times to keep it very simple, keep it very common sense about it. And it really is taking away the pitching side of it, bringing it to just a foundational throw better. Okay, now you're doing that a lot better. Let's now start to talk about how you pitch. And Twitter, I try to stay away from Twitter as much as I can, because it's a nasty place. And anytime you put anything on there, they just take it for what it is right there, instead of like a whole view of everything. So it gets kind of tricky. So anyway, it's been fun to see how even Twitter has been nice to me on those on seeing how this thing could work. Because it really is visual. It sells itself. It really is. It's such one of those things that I've heard 100 times from scouts and from former coaches of mine. And they all say the same thing. As soon as they see it once, they go, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? That's so simple. And it really is. But that's the beauty of some things is kids need simple, and they need to repeat it all the time. And then you can get geeky. We have all the geeky stuff here. We have the TrackMans, we have PTs, we have everything that will break down why someone's, tight in this position or not in that position correctly. But a lot of times they haven't figured out there's a first step before you get to that might make even bigger differences. Then you attack that stuff, and now it's a lot easier, and everybody works together then.
Well, one of the beauties of it, and I haven't tried it, I've just watched everyone do it. I know they sold out pretty quick. I went on there like 2 weeks after I saw they were out there. So we're gonna try it out at our facility too, and I'm expecting to see some of the same things. But one of the things that I love about it, and I had a podcast with Randy Sullivan from Florida Baseball Ranch maybe a couple months back, and we talked about what the athlete's focused on. Is it internal? Is there an internal focus, an external focus? Basically, whether the athlete has some sort of cognitive thought that they're basically required to go through in order to complete a throw in such a manner that you want them to complete it. Do they have to think about this very specific thing every time they throw in order to make their throw look the way that it needs to look or move the way that it needs to move? Or are they able to move in an authentic manner where they do it subconsciously without thinking about it, and it happens and it sequences in the correct manner? And the nice thing about something like what you've put together is athlete doesn't have to think, oh, I got to step 2 inches to the left, or I got to lift my elbow higher, or I got to bring the ball in closer to my head, or whatever. They can just sit there and go. And as long as they initiate the throw in the right way, they're probably going to finish the throw and move through the acceleration phase in the proper manner. The problem is when all these kids get in there and I see it a lot in my injured guys, and with injured guys, it's tough because that's maybe 50% of what we see. It's tough because they can only throw at a certain percent exertion. Sometimes I can't risk at all them ending up in the wrong position. There's no time for them to self-organize, as many people say, into the right position. So a lot of times early on, it's very structured. Hey, you start from this position, you go. Now you bring the ball from here to this position and you go. Yep. And then they get stuck in that. Maybe now they're 3-4 weeks into the process, and we can kind of migrate away from that. And certain athletes are more analytical or just more cognitively focused on things, then they get kind of stuck in that. And that's where I could really see your product working well, is these guys that are, hey, I'm 4 or 5 weeks into my return to throw program, maybe 6 weeks in. Now I'm going away from having to think about every single thing I do and just let it happen.
Well, you nailed it. And I'll be really excited to hear your feedback using it on injured players, because I really feel that the physical therapy world should have this in every single one of them if they deal with anybody that's an overhead thrower, because it's such a useful way to take an athlete that can't throw yet, but needs to do some dry work, but needs to also understand it's a kinetic chain and it's a flow. And this can create that flow without putting stress on you. And now you're way ahead of the game. Because I had 2 shoulder surgeries, so I know what it's like to have to pick that baseball up for the first week of throwing, or the first day, or even all the way through it. I've seen people never come back from their surgeries because of not knowing how they used to throw or how they should throw, and they just create these just awful compensated movements that they feel is protecting their arm. And by the time that they've realized it's not going to work for them, they can't fix it. It's already past that. And if earlier in the stages of throwing, you can get your arm working in sync with your body and your hips and your positions, it's massive. That's really massive. And I think that's something that's, exciting, because we have had some PTs and some sports doctors who have gotten them, and then they've said, this is incredible for us. This is great. And I really think that that's what it's needed for. It's right there.
Yeah, that seems, and it's one thing. I always talk about injury, but really the best time to improve your throwing mechanics is before you get injured. And I can tell you that from personal experience, and I'm sure you could say the same thing. But
100%.
It's tough with the injured guys because of the situation they're in, but really the guys that are going to benefit the most are the guys that are healthy before they get injured, because There's certain things that we see in the injured athletes, and it's generally the same thing that we see in the guys that are plateaued. Generally, when I get athletes who are plateaued in their velocity, or they're not reaching the levels that they need to reach, they're generally that 15, 16-year-old kid who's now, hey, I played freshman baseball or JV baseball, or maybe even made varsity, and now I'm at 60 foot, 90 foot, and I'm trying to utilize some of the things that allowed me to be successful at 50, 70 or whatever it is. And I'm throwing in such a way that, yeah, I was able to be successful, stronger, maybe faster than the rest of these kids. And now I'm at a point where, these kids are catching up to me physically. Maybe I reached puberty early, whatever, and still utilizing some of the same things that, hey, I basically limped through these younger guy levels. And now I'm stuck at a point where I've thrown 75 miles an hour for 2.5 or 3 years. And it's easy to see when they throw why they're plateaued at that level. And it's not necessarily because they're not physically strong enough. And that's, I think, been done to death, is like, hey, you need to get, you're too weak. You just need to squat more. You need to drive with the legs harder. And it's like, well, great, you can drive with the legs as hard as you want, but if you don't transfer any of that energy, or you transfer such a small percentage of that energy to where it needs to go, you're never going to throw as hard as you possibly can.
Yeah, technique and skill acquisition has been so far behind in baseball because of just the mentality of most coaches out there, that it takes work. It really takes a lot of work as a coach to make something change, because it's frustrating time too. It could be a curve where you're going to have to kind of struggle a little bit, but on the outside of it, you're going to get good. Now, name me another sport that wouldn't look at somebody and go, man, if you can move a little better, you're going to enhance your track speed. So you're a track runner and you run and your hands are out here like this, but you're fast. Your coach isn't going to go, wow, he's already pretty fast. Let's not change that. No, he's going to go, wow, he's fast like that. Wait till we get him to start working inside and start to do the things. He's going to be so much quicker. A weight room, you're going to work on technique before you do a squat, before you have them load a bunch of weight. Swimmers are going to learn how to swim with better technique before they think about getting faster. Like, it's just, baseball is like, oh, wow, you hide the ball well. I could use you over here for this. They don't even think of fixing it. They just go, wow, don't lose that. I can use that for my against my lefties, and the kid's going to be like, oh, great, you're going to be good for about that year, useful for him. And then as soon as the season, you get older, everybody gets stronger. You're pretty much out, and you're so far behind the 8-ball, you're done. So to me, it's like, get them younger to move better, and then we can see it. It's kind of funny because in the middle, not a lot of people touch the players in the middle, or think like they need to adjust. But if you get to the big leagues, you'll see pitchers, really good high-level pitchers, who have changed quite a bit. You just haven't noticed it, but they have a good instinct about why they need to change, and it's all about longevity. It's all about playing that baseball for a long time. And a young kid, you got time to change. This is your guy you want to get right now. He hasn't had any habits yet. Make his habits solid and make him have that foundation. And now you don't even have to mess around. But then you get anywhere in the middle of those windows, there's too much noise. There's so much noise and so many things going on that it's hard to have an established voice. I get it all the time where, a high school coach will say oh man, don't go over there because he just teaches one way. Well, that's a pretty damn good way to do it, first of all. And secondly, you have 20 other pitchers on your team that I don't work with. If I work with one guy or two guys, you'll be okay. You can teach them all the different ways you want on those guys. Allow these guys to learn that way. But it just boils down to all the noise and all the insecurity that happens at certain levels, that kids get thrown in the middle of that, and they're the ones that get hurt in the long run. And it's unfortunate to see. And it kind of gives me the motivation, though, to push hard and to create things like I have, and try to get it out to as many people as I can. That way they can work on it on their own without anybody seeing what they're doing or how they're doing it, and just be able to do it in their room, do it in their garage, just like a hitter would. But now it's a pitcher being able to take dry reps in their basement, or in their garage, or in their room, and then come out of it in the winter, after winter time or after a break time, and be like, wow, what'd you do? He looks so much different. And I've seen this so many times over the last 10 years doing it, that it's exciting to see now, parents and kids telling me what's happening in big leaguers, quite honestly. There's some huge names in the big leagues that have been using these techniques, not just Joe Kelly and Pete Fairbanks and some of the names that you've heard and attached to me, but there's a lot of them that I haven't talked about, or I can't talk about, that are doing it. And it's really kind of cool to see kind of the baseball shift going on and understanding the value of some of these things that need to have happen.
Well, one of the most narrow-sighted viewpoints is, oh, you're teaching them all in one way. Now, I've watched a lot of your videos online, and I can't describe two guys that throw exactly the same out of anyone. And it's the same way with us. I've heard the same thing. It's like, well, they teach them all to throw the same way. It's like, no, I use a few drills consistently among guys, but every guy that does those things is working on something slightly different. And they're never going to throw the same way because they're not built the same way. They've not learned to throw the same way from a young age. One guy's maybe a little more flexible here, a little stronger here. They're all going to throw differently. There's some key things that they need to do in a similar fashion to allow them to have longevity, be durable, and then ultimately realize their full potential in terms of velocity, in terms of spin rate, which people don't talk about, in terms of mechanics, which is very, very important. And then you have these guys and these coaches or even these parents that come forward with this sort of, and I call it a narrow-sighted viewpoint, but really they're not looking at throwing in the fashion that you've looked at it or in the fashion that I've looked at it. They look at the throw and they say, well, that guy does this different. That guy does this different than this guy. They're looking at what's different among pitchers rather than what are the similar things that allowed these guys to be successful. And you talk about your windows, and we use the phrase phases of the throw or phase specificity. What happens at this phase, and this phase that are similar among all of these elite level throwers, maybe not identical, but similar, that allows them to be successful.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. I like that. I'm going to steal that. Look at the ways that they do the things similar, not the ones they do differently. I like that. Yeah, no doubt about it. There's when you've done enough and you worked around enough players, and I think that's our strength here, is that we see so many players from all ages rather than me just only catering to the highest of the high level. I think you become less good at what you do because your eyes start to be tricked and fooled, rather than when you go see a kid that's just not strong enough to do something wrong and you just do something subtle, like start with an arm path, and you see a huge difference in his performance just like that. Now, you know, as a coach that there's going to be more things you got to get doing, but this first thing that you did just accomplished a ton of things, and it's the first part of the chain. Then you move to some of these other parts. But I want to always see how much better can I get them if I see that window. So it's just checklist. You just check that. Okay, that looks good. All right, let's move to that. And then, okay, let's get to that one. Nothing's more important than the other as far as like, you're only as strong as your weakest link. But what's most important, I find, is starting with the right thing and then teaching the next things, even though you may have to wait, even though you see it. You go, there's oftentimes where I'm working on a kid and I know this kid. I've worked with him for months and his progress has been crazy great. And then a coach comes in or someone who kind of knows some baseball and he looks, he goes, oh God, you need to fix that. He's pitching across his body, and I'm like, I get that, in my mind, I'm like, thank you, appreciate that. But, or on Twitter or Instagram, it's like, oh, fixed his knee shin angle, and what a difference. But they don't know, that's a snapshot. You don't understand how far he's come. And if I take his mind off that, he's going to go right back to old habits.
And what if he has no hip? What if he has no hip rotation? They don't know. I mean, that's the problem. Right. It's like this guy might have hip impingement. He has no hip rotation, and this guy right here may have improved by 15 degrees, but he's still working on his hamstring flexibility. He can't get his chest forward in the throw because he's lived in a position where he doesn't have any hamstring flexibility, but that's not there.
That's why I just say thank you. I just say thank you. I'll work on that. I don't go into the stream of nothingness that every guru likes to get into. And it's just, I'm like, oh my God, not enough characters to be able to fix this one.
Yeah. I got a quick question for you though. Do you guys work with many softball players?
Interestingly, no, we don't. I definitely am going to. We're partnering with someone who does a lot of good softball stuff here because the Pocket Path is going to be coming out with softball, and it would be out already right now, but our supplier messed up some sizing, so we were waiting to launch. But once we launch that, I feel like that is a massive place where this could be really instrumental in training how they throw. And I have my theories on why softball has such odd throwing, because my daughter has a soccer practice at this field, and and right behind me is a softball practice, and I look over and I just cringe at the throwing that I'm seeing over there. And they're just an absolute train wreck. And the girls that can throw right, they look amazing. And that's just because they look like they're sequenced. They're just like a pocket pass. That's what they're doing. But then you have these other girls that are just taking the ball out fast. They hold here, they rattle it, they shake it, they do all kinds of things. And crazy enough, I have a hitting coach in here that had his daughter at a softball team, travel ball team out here locally. And the coach was having them, all right, coach, the girls are all down the line. Put the ball up, figure 8, get some rhythm, and throw. And I was like, what? So,
and then they do that. Then they go like this, and their arm has that huge hitch. They go way back, and then there's the big hit.
And my theory on it is that, you know, dads never played girls softball, for one, and dads, you know, with their daughter going, oh God, what do I do here? Let me look up. I know. I picture what's the iconic logo for softball. It's always that softball girl, right? That looks like this, but they don't realize that's a pitcher. That's the pitcher doing this, and that's part of pitching, because she's going to come back around that way. But I think what everybody thinks is you start there, every softball girl, and then you throw from there. And yikes, bad stuff. So so we have worked with a handful of softball girls. They've done amazingly well, but we just never have really pushed it or marketed it. We will once we get the pocket pass softball going. But for sure,
I ask because of that specifically, which is softball players play with a ball that's heavier, and they start at a young age with this heavy ball. You see that some have to sequence their throw in a efficient manner to make the ball go in the intended direction at a sufficient speed. And then you have the rest of the girls who maybe have to throw it in a specific manner, as well as think about what the coach has told them to do. And then it results in a really peculiar throw. And I tell the softball players that come in, most of the softball players I see are injured softball players. I would say 90% of the softball players I see, they started with me as a result of an injury. And it's always one of two peculiar things they do in the throw. And I would say 75% of them end up in this position and end up going through an acceleration phase where their elbow gets really, really high. And then right at the end, they kind of push the ball, like tricep push it. And part of it, I think, is due to drills just like that. And then maybe they're not strong enough. Like baseball players, I see so much variation in the way they throw because the ball's much lighter relative to their strength. And so they're able to compensate in other manners. Whereas the softball players, they're trying to do what coach told them, which may work for 1 out of 20 girls. And you're doing it on 20 girls.
Well, it's usually, and it's usually the girl who is your best thrower, right? She's probably playing shortstop. So her 5 minutes of instruction on the left field line, maybe less, it gets trumped by the ground balls that she's getting hit, throwing the ball to second, throwing to first, throwing to third. So she's going to end up getting so much better work without coaching, because she has to be efficient and fast and accurate, just being an infielder without coaching, without thinking. And then, so she doesn't barely digest probably any of it, that she's supposed to do these drills over here. Yeah, that's fine. I'll do that. But she instinctually knows that I need to make these throws like this, and my body doesn't even have to think, it does these. But these other girls, unfortunately, probably have to spend more time working on that, the outfielders and some of these other positions. And unfortunately, it's bad. It's one of the, even at college, I have Alan Jaeger, good friend of mine. He goes, man, Dave, if you get this to the softball world, even at the D1 level, I was just at a major Division I national title, and I could not believe how bad the throwing was all across the board. And I was like, man, that's pretty that's saying something when you're talking about that guy talking about this certain program and saying that they were all terrible.
And they may get away with it because of especially the infielders, often like the third baseman, even second baseman, they get away with it because of the distance, I'm guessing. Sure. And the outfielders is where I think it's more of a performance limiting factor than anything for, besides maybe hitting. But in terms of the field for these softball players, especially, is the throwing capacity.
Well, they're throwing the field's short, which hides the actual result. The problem is these girls get stronger throwing poorly, as you're seeing in your therapy, is that they're going to hurt themselves because of the bad throw. They might be able to throw the ball accurately and make the plays. The problem isn't that. The problem is that they're putting more stress on their arm as they get stronger and throw harder to those bases.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is like where that missing link can happen if they learn how to throw better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens with your pocket path. I'm excited to give it a try myself with a lot of my athletes, especially some of these guys that come in, college guy, they come in, maybe I see them 2-3 times and then they're off to college and they're sending me videos, or they're like, what can I do? You know, I still am having this problem, or, you know, these things have improved, but not this one. And giving them some way to do it in a results oriented fashion, or a knowledge of results fashion is something that I'm always interested in. So I look forward to seeing that. Where can people find you online?
Okay. So the Pocket Path is pocketpath.com. So www.pocketpath.com. Right now we're waiting for the full kits to get there, but we have the quick kit. The quick kit is the belt and sleeve. Comes with videos, drills, programs. So that's the really neat part of it anyway. The other kit part, the full part, has the weighted balls that come with it, the 5-ounce ones. So probably look for about 2 weeks before those things are probably restocked, so they can get their hands though right now on the quick kit and get those shoot out today. And you can follow me on Instagram as well at PFA Baseball 1, or just search Dave Coggin. And you can also follow us on Pocket Path on Instagram as well, and Twitter. It's Dave Coggin PFA Baseball. So find us there. I put out a lot of content. You can hashtag Dave Coggin videos if you're ever bored and want to see some videos that I've done in the past. And that's where we'll find us. And hopefully we can help out and answer as many questions as we can and help those arms stay healthy.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on. I think this was awesome. Appreciate it.
Cool. I appreciate it, Nick. All right. Thanks again.
Yep.